When it comes to the review of any tournament that I like to do, I just start with the bucket system. I don't really want to review the tournament. Lucas Glover was your winner. I didn't watch a lot of it. I certainly didn't watch any of it on the weekend. I was in a golf tournament of my own. I did watch Thursday, Friday, and I couldn't tell you anything that I learned. Like, I just don't remember. So we're going to start here with the bucket system. And really, the only column that you should be paying attention to is the success column here that I've highlighted. Now, you're going to see a Y or an N. Y means yes, N means no, and that determines was it a success, like the bucket. Now, what I am comparing that success to is my projections. So I have projections here. In this column here, it says min projection. This is our minimum. We always round down. So whatever that number is, we round down. And then in this column, the max projection, we round up. So if, just for example, this last year one column, our min was 1.05. That rounds down to 1. And our max projection was 1.75. That rounds up to 2. Now there's a caveat here. If that max projection is not greater than 2, our min has to be 0. And the reason is I want a 2-point buffer. 2-point buffer between the minimum and the max. I have learned that that is the perfect buffer that you need. Those are the perfect projections to always have a 2-point difference between the two. So if, again, this isn't greater than 2, we always round down, always with the minimum. Now, in the case of like this bucket here, where it says 0.23 to 0.38, well, when we round down to 0 and we look at our max projection, it says 1, we can't go further down than 0. So then our max will always be 2. So the worst projection will always be 0 to 2. So just keep that in mind. And to determine if this was a success, we look at how many golfers finished inside the top 10 for each of these buckets. And if that number fits within the projection that we have, it's a success. Simple as that. So in this first bucket, you can see there was one inside the top 10. Perfect. Now, the next one's actually really interesting because we had 3 golfers that finished inside the top 10. Our projection was 0 to 2. Well, that doesn't, that's not a success. If this bucket or if this column here, the top 10, if this is outside this range, then we look at how many golfers were actually in the optimal lineup. And if that number is within the projection, then it was a success. Don't really look at this column here, the SSO, that's the sweet spot optimal. Just know that it's these 2 columns that determine if this bucket was a success or not. And as we scroll through this, you can actually see all but 2 were successful. So 34 to 36 buckets, that's pretty good. I do like to build the best lineup you possibly can using the sweet spot process. That's what I call the sweet spot optimal. I usually compare that to the GPP winner. If the sweet spot optimal does beat the GPP winner lineup, then the sweet spot process was 100% successful. Despite, like, as you can see here, 34 out of 36 buckets were successful. So still good success rate, just not 100%. Now, before I actually do review the optimal versus the GPP versus the sweet spot optimal, I do want to go over Marquee Tee Times because that's also included in the sweet spot process. So if you're unfamiliar with this segment, basically what I do is I look at every group that are paired together Thursday, Friday. I add their sweet spot ranks, and whatever's the lowest, I rank them the best. So it's a rank order of the best groups in the field. And of course, they're all paired up in 3s. So I've highlighted 3, each team, each group, basically. Now, here's the rule. You don't want to pair up in your golf lineups, in your DFS lineups. You don't want to pair up 2 golfers from the same group in your lineups. And I say that because dating back to 2019, the 2019 PGA Championship, 90% of optimal lineups did not have golfers paired up together in the Marquee Tee Times. And that's how long I've been tracking this, a little bit further back than the PGA Championship. So take that as you will. If you don't care, that's fine. But just to note, as you can see, these little black tick marks, they indicate optimal lineups. And guess what? There were 3. The other, I forgot to mention this. you want to select 2 to 4 golfers from the Marquee Tee Times and none of them playing with each other. And there you go. We have 3 of them here. Russell Henley, Webb Simpson, and Billy Horschel were all in the optimal lineup. Another thing to look at are the green salaries. This indicates the sweet spot optimal. So I had Russell Henley and JT Poston. So this follows the sweet spot process. We had 3 golfers in the Marquee Tee Times that were in the optimal lineup and they weren't playing together. So that fits the rules for the Marquee Tee Times. And of course you can see the sweet spot optimal is highlighted as well. So let's go ahead and let's take a look. We're going to look at the optimal versus the GPP versus the sweet spot optimal to determine, was the sweet spot process 100% successful? Your optimal lineup left $2,200 on the table and it scored 693 points. Basically, it was the top 6 golfers in on the leaderboard. That was Lucas Glover, Benny Ann, Russell Henley, Billy Horschel, Webb Simpson, and Michael Kim. If you want to call out the salaries, it's a 10K, an 8K, 3 7s, and a 6. By the way, Michael Kim, as you can see, scored 101.1 or 101.5 points. So too did Charlie Hoffman. They're both $6,700. Charlie is also included in the optimal lineup. So you could have swapped Michael Kim and Charlie Hoffman and you'd have got the same result. So just throwing that out there. Your GPP winning lineup, this is kind of cool. It's all bunched up. You had Lucas Glover, Benny Ann, and Russell Henley, so 10, 8, 7. Then you had Steven Yeager, $8,900, and then 2 other 7K golfers. So that's a 10, 8, 8, and 3 7s. That used up all 50,000 of the salary, and it scored 660 points. Now, if the sweet spot optimal scores more than 660 points, it is a 100% success rate. I say that because it follows the buckets completely. It follows the Marquee Tee Times completely. It follows this whole process that I talk about during the preview videos as well as the strategy videos. So if we can take down a GPP, then it's a success. And of course, the old moniker is, let's aim for the optimal lineup, because if we miss, we might hit the GPP winner instead. So the sweet spot optimal left $600 on the table. It used Lucas Glover at 75, Benny Ann at 84, Russell Henley at 10.2, JT Poston at 9K, Brendan Ton at 7, and Michael Kim at 6. So just to repeat this from the past optimal and GPP winning lineups, that follows the 10-9-8-7-7-6 approach. Used 49,400 against $600 on the table. Again, it only has to beat 660 points. It scores 669 points. So sweet spot process, 100% successful. Got to throw that nice in there, of course. Forgot to do that. But yeah, if you followed the sweet spot process, you could have gotten yourself on those golfers and taken down a GPP. The $5 drive the green. So 25,000 could have been yours. You would have started with those golfers. Personally, for me, I anchored around Sung J M. I just had the most confidence he was going to finish inside the top 10, and that was pretty darn close. He finished 14th. So unfortunately, starting with Sung J did not really net me the best results. I was in it in a couple contests, like winner take alls, but not super great when a lot of those winner take alls used Russell Henley and things of that nature. So also, just to throw something out there, I keep track of ownership, like after the fact. These aren't projected ownership numbers. Your optimal lineup. So if we just go top down ownership percentage, look at how many were in the GPP winning lineup. This is the top. Let's see here. What would this be? Top 26 owned golfers. Now, of course, it's cherry picking. It goes from 8% up to 34%. Now, Denny McCarthy. Hey, if you're like, I am not going to play Denny McCarthy at 35% ownership, and that's the hill you were going to die on, you were successful this week. But if you're like, you know what, I want a 10K golfer, but I don't want the highest owned 10K golfer, then you would have missed out on Russell Henley. Simple as that. Oh, by the way, JT Poston at $9,200, he was in the sweet spot optimal. He was the 4th highest. Brendan Todd was the 6th highest owned golfer, and he was also in the sweet spot optimal. So it's hard just to fade chalk to fade chalk. You know, I think one of the better messages that are sent out there is DGen75, who's like, sometimes you got to play chalk, sometimes you don't. Now, obviously, it's not clear what you should do, but, you know, maybe Denny at 35% is a bit crazy. But, of course, here at SweetSpotDFS, the optimal lineup doesn't care about projected ownership. It doesn't even care about ownership in general. It just cares about how you build your lineups together. It cares about what golfers from which buckets you put together. And that's the bottom line. It does not matter with ownership. I just wanted to throw that out there because I noticed this week there were a lot of high ownership numbers up there inside the top 10, top 20. So anyways, that's going to cover a review of the Wyndham Championship.